Hello, sports fans. Mauricio here. Well, this is a big day. It's time to save sales. Um, we have two levels of the sale. We're saving data at two levels of granularity. At the product level, what products are sold on each invoice, and then overall level. So the product level, you can have 100 items, 100 line items. Well, that's also rolled up into one summary table. So, we've done a lot. We have a way to add new customers. We have a way to add new products, and now it's time to add new sales. But right off the bat, we have some new things going on here. Um, whereas um, before maybe we used a radio button list and these were typed in values. Now we have a drop-down list, and these values have been retrieved from the database. And so we actually retrieve two columns rather than all the columns. But if you retrieved all the columns, we're just going to use two of them. Um, but it's not much different than clicking a button and retrieving a whole table of data. Um, what we're going to do is just retrieve the table of data and just use the first column or the first two columns. So, for example, in the customers drop-down list, we're going to use the full name as the text, the data text field, and then we're going to use the customer ID field um, for the value of that drop down list. So when we say selected value, when we get the selected value, it's going to select the primary key, the customer ID. And that's kind of how you do it. You show a textual field, but you capture the primary key, in this case, customer ID, or the same thing for product ID. And the question is, why show the name? Well, that's a convenience to the program user. But why capture and use from this web control? Why capture and use the primary key that goes along with that? And that's because the tables are connected on a foreign key constraint, customer ID and product ID. Well, so how did so these drop-down lists are very handy, and to load them from a database is not that much work. We'll make sure we do that now. But these are very, very handy to have, and they also prevent the program user from just typing in some crazy stuff. So if you had a game of text box, they could type whatever they want. So here we're making them pull from a list, so that's much better. But before we get started, we have to talk about, okay, well, how did these get here? Well, so let's take a look. So before um, the code um, was on the button refresh customers list. So when you double click refresh customers list, it actually had, about 15, 20 lines of code. Now all it's doing is calling a procedure refresh customers array. So here's the deal. If you have code that's in ASP.NET, if you have code that's going to be run over and over and over, well, the trick is to take that code and put it on a procedure that's not connected to any event. So the button click procedures are connected to the button click event. So this code, whatever code was here would only run when the event happened. But like I said, this code, in this case, to go get a bunch of customers and display them, so display them in a grid view, this code is going to be run over and over and over. there's many times in this program where we're going to need to get a list of the customers or a list of the products. So it makes sense to move the code from a dedicated, they call it event handler, a dedicated button click event. It makes sense to move that code to what they call a general procedure. So anytime we want, we could say call this procedure. So refresh customers array. So the data table in memory is in the memory of the web page. The data table G customers table is going to be updated. So clear out the rows, fill the table. Again, maybe it's got some new data in it, and then use it as the data source of the grid view. What we're going to do new today is have a drop-down list, which also has a data source. So that line is going to be exactly the same. But what we're doing is freeing up this code to write once, use many places. So there's many places in this code that we're going to have to refresh the customers list. For example, after you add one, or maybe when you turn on the facility to save a record, we want to get the latest customers list. Maybe somebody got deleted. Maybe they didn't pay their bills and they got deleted. So, so it makes sense to take code that's used over and over and put it in a general procedure and call that from different places in the program. And that's what we're doing. So when they click on the new sale here, we're going to run the general procedure to get the fresh version of the products table and get a fresh version of the customers table. And you could see doing that makes data entry a lot easier and saves data errors. So using a drop-down list is a way to enforce referential integrity, which means we're not going to, in this case, we're not going to have bogus customers in our, making purchases, and we're not going to have sales of bogus products to our customers. All right, so what did that refresh customers array do? Scroll it up. It filled a global customers table, and that global table can be shown in the view for customers, but that global table can also be used as a data source for a drop-down list on another view. So this link button 4, that's the link button for the new sale. It's a good idea to comment your code at least every 3 lines or let you know what's going on. So it looks like some tables are being cleared out. We're refreshing some global tables, the G products table and the G customers table. So the called procedure is refreshing, fetching, running a select statement, fetching that data. And now this drop-down list, DDL drop-down list, is going to connect to that global table data source. Is going to be that global table. And I mentioned the data text field previously. Let's see over here. We typed those in. We had the text field and the value field. Well, and in the code, we often use the dot selected value in the code when we're saving the data. Now in the code, we're selecting which column. from a table. So these are just typed in this radio button list, but these column values will be retrieved from a from a couple of columns in a table. And so the product name column is the data source for the data text field, what's going to be displayed. So product name is displayed. The value, in this case, product ID or customer ID, that's what's captured behind the scenes. So when the program user selects a product, it's going to capture the product ID, and then we're going to use that for the data entry, and everything works good because that's what the, in this case, sales details table wants the product ID. It doesn't want the product name. And, we could add both. That could be an extension. But these two drop-down lists are filled. So this code fills or loads or populates the DDL, the drop-down lists. And that is a nice trick. Again, it saves data entry errors. So that's, of course, a very big deal. All right, so you use the drop-down list, you'd say what the data source is, same as if it was a grid view, but we only want two columns. So the data text field, again, is what you show. The data value field is kind of behind the scenes. And what we'll use this always will be the primary key for that entity, in this case, product or customer. So set the data source, data text field, data value field. Got to do this data bind because that connects it. And then at the top, we're going to add item 0. We're going to add row 0 that says select a product. The downfall of a drop-down list is if you don't select anything, then the very first item on the list is automatically selected for you. Usually that's not a good idea. So the first value on the list says select one. So we make sure that, we give them a prompt to select one. We also check that they selected one. But this gives a message, a prompt to the program user like, hey, select one. All right, so that was a major change. So that's how those got there. And now we can go ahead and process a sale.